blocks. I used to get on my bicycle, ride all over the place looking for that zoo. And I finally, after a while, decided it wasn't no zoo in Cameron Park, but they had a pond called Green Lake, where the Gibbon Island is now. That's Green Lake. I used to fish there at the cane pole, knock wasp nests down, get stuff to fish with. And up on 4th Street, there was a bench. And if you look down where the African Veldt is now, that's where the high school football teams practice football. I sat there watching them play football. And after all these years, all the stuff that happened, finally found the zoo in Cameron Park. Out here. And that was really big. I did have some glasses. Don't worry, I'm not going to do all this. I'll drop it before I get through. I try to mainly come up with stuff that might be kind of funny. And when I was living over here in about 1956, I saw in the paper where there were some people starting a zoo. And they started it out the old Lackland Airport, and they got about an acre of land and an old fire station. And they got some animals together. They had one baboon, 2 spider monkeys, and stuff like that. And I went out and volunteered. And they had this old fire station, and inside the fire station, they nailed hardware cloth and 1 or 2 welded wire and all the doors. And so where all of the rooms were, that was where the animals were. And my first day, I said, what can I do? They said, clean the javelinas. And the javelinas was inside the thing, step over. And there's 3 javelinas, adults. So I got a broom and a shovel, and I went in there, and I sweep it. And when the javelinas get too close, I hit them with that broom. They move out of the way, they pop. They didn't like that, but they didn't bother me. They allowed me to do that. But I didn't know anything. I just wanted to learn to be a zookeeper. And I remember one Sunday, I was cleaning. We had a spider monkey with a baby. And a spider monkey, I later learned, you don't mess with in any way. They're scatterbrains. Don't fool with the spider. But I didn't know that then. And I opened it up to clean the cage, and she came out and got me around the neck and just sit in my lap with that baby. It was so neat. I cleaned the cage. That was really neat. But I tried to put her back. And you don't grab a spider monkey and do that. And boy, she went up me like an ear of corn. She started with my thumb and got me on the lip and on my shins. And when she got through with me, she got her baby and sit in the cage and let me shut it. In 1960, I was catching rattlesnakes and selling them to a blind animal dealer in Fort Worth. What was his name? Dale Logston. And one evening I was selling Dale some rattlesnakes, and his wife came home. She worked at the zoo. And she said, with your interest in rattlesnakes and other snakes, how would you like to go to work in our new herpetarium? I said, well, what's a herpetarium? She said, it's a reptile house, and there's a brand new one being built in Fort Worth. And I can get you an interview with the zoo director if you want, if you think you'd like to work there. I said, I sure would. So I got an interview with Lawrence Curtis, and we got through, and he hired me. And Jerry was waiting outside in our old 50 model GMC pickup. And she said, did you get the job? I said, I sure did. I'm going to be a herpiculturist. She said, what's that? I said, damn if I know, but I bet you I'll find out pretty soon. And, so I came to work for Fort Worth Zoo as a herpiculturist in their new herpetarium. And it was being finalized about 2 months ago before it was open to the public. We had a lot to learn. And it turned out there's 3 people, and I had the most experience with poisonous snakes of everybody. Because I'm a rattlesnake. And we spent our time, as they would complete a cage and exhibit, we would build an exhibit in that cage. And then go to Dallas and pick up animals at the airport. The boxes came in all the time, all over the world. The most exciting time I've ever had. And we had a good library, so we'd study all the time. Someone would come in, we'd study that thing, figure out everything we could about it. And then on the back of each exhibit, we had a sign. We had red signs and green signs, and hot and cold. And we put the common name, the scientific name, what it is. And every day, we had 204 exhibits plus the reserve. So every day you go read those things. Every time you go by, you read them. And we learned them pretty well. But, we'd study at night, and then 2 or 3 nights a week we'd go snake hunting. The city furnished us a car and gas, and we were out chasing stuff. We had a lot of fun. And the night before we opened the Herpetarium to the public, we had a large exhibit, aquatic exhibit, for a crocodile. And I said, well, I'll go get it. And it was a 7-foot American croc, and it was in a cave back in there a little ways with the alligators. We drained the pond. And we went there, and I'd handled a few alligators. So I laid down, I crawled in there a little ways. I got it by the tail, and they pulled me out. And I took a snake hook or something and got his mouth shut. That's what we do with alligators, but we'd also tie the mouth. Tape it. I didn't do that, but I got 4 guys, 1 on each foot. I had the head, and we started for the Herpetarium. We got to the wall, and as I started over the wall, that thing spun. Everybody got off of it, except one guy that worked for the contractor, had it by the end of the tail. And I said, it was dark, and I said, let me go check, because he may have bit me, I'm not sure, because my thumb feels kind of weird. And went inside, and I put my thumb on the water, and water ran through it. And I said, that's that 4th tooth. So I went to the hospital. They put 12 stitches in there. We came back 2 or 3 hours later, and this guy we left was sitting there holding that crocodile by the tail. And I said, hey, turn him loose. And he turned him loose, and we never saw that guy again. So when we opened the zoo, Lawrence Curtis made me sit in a chair and answer questions with my hand bandaged up. Well, what happened to you? Well, crocodile bit me. And I was really embarrassed, but I had to do that. And then we had a large reticulated pipe, and we had a cage at front with curved glass. A large reticulated pipe in there. People walk up to it. Well, the piping wasn't really well, and I had my job was to give it a heart stimulant about every hour and try to keep it alive for the grand opening. And after I give it a heart stimulant, move its tail around to different areas. I did that all day. That was kind of interesting. And then we'd worked a couple of weeks or so, or maybe a month, I don't know. And this guy was hired 1 week before me. He said, I'm the chief horticulturist. I found out later that he wasn't. But he said that big king cobra's got eye caps, and we got to get those eye caps off. I found out later he had never handled a poisonous snake. He said, now, we had a pole with a leather noose about 1 inch thick, so it wouldn't hurt the snake. And we opened the cage, and he got that thing about 4 foot down. And he said, now you get his head. And he pulled it in the floor. And I took a snake hook and I got his head, got it behind the head. And he said, okay, now I'm going to run get the medicine. I said, where is it? He said, it's at the aquarium, the other end of the zoo. And he left. And that king was all over me, down my shirt. They'll sometimes get down my shirt. And so I sit there waiting on that guy, my hand's cramping, figuring I can't no way turn it loose. And when he finally came, I said, "Where have you been?" He said, "The park police stopped me for riding a bicycle in the zoo. And they made me put the bicycle up and walk back." Anyway, we popped the eye caps and we got that king back in the cage. And that was the largest king I've ever had anything to do with. I've only had 3, but that was, I think that must have been 12 feet or so. So big, and it looked twice as big to me when the guy said grab his head. So there's some things happening at Herpetarium. I worked there for almost 3 years. In Waco Zoo, at that time they built a reptile house and asked me to come back as curator of reptiles and birds. So I went back to Waco as curator of reptiles and birds. And that was some interesting times. The new reptile house, the guy that was director there named Buddy Porterfield, and he and I went to different places trying to get reptiles for a new building. One of the places we went was to Slidell, Louisiana, and met with a guy by the name of Arthur Jones. Anybody ever heard of Arthur Jones? Well, Arthur, his house had a snake exhibit around it. And he'd sit in the living room and paid money to go in. And if he heard you tapping on the glass, he could get all over you. So I was sitting there talking to him, and in front of us, he had a wooden locker box. And it's a coffee table. We're drinking coffee. And I was there to get a couple of Indian cobras. And we'd drink a while and talk a while. And he'd kick that thing open, and the cobras would rear up. He said, "See one you like?" I said, "Well, let me see." He'd shut it and said, "Well, let's have some more coffee." So we kept on. We finally got our cobras. And he had other snakes and things. And he had a big trench dug, a big pond, and the largest crocodile I've ever seen in it. And he said, "By the way, that crocodile," they told me how long. I said, "Boy, that's big. I don't look that long." He said, "All right, you want the head or the tail? I've got a tape measure here." I said, "No, it's every bit that long." And he uncrated a large water monitor. He didn't, but people worked for him. He just came in. Large, like 7-foot water monitor, wild caught. We'd had a couple of herpetariums, and those things, wild caught, really are a handful. And it run past us into the swampy area. And the guy behind it, well, I outran him and got to it and jumped on it. And I was waiting on Jones to come help me. Well, he got about halfway there and he stopped and he pulled down his pants and said, "My hemorrhoids, I got to get in fixed before I can help him." And he finally got over there and helped me and got that thing tied up. In his back room, he was working on a project. And he finished that project later, and I was sitting watching the news, TV in Houston. And it came on the news, Arthur Jones is a millionaire. He just sold his invention called the Nautilus for so and so many millions. And so he went to Florida and he built some really nice places for crocodiles, and he really airports with runways, and he bought him a Learjet and some small planes, and what's the 727, the pretty good sized jet. And he learned how to fly. He could fly all the others, but he learned how to fly that. And he married a young gal, and he taught her how to fly. And so they flew around that thing. And they went to Africa, and I got some little elephants one time. But there was a place right outside Dallas, the drive-through zoo where Blind Country's Fire. Well, they told me that Arthur Jones flew in one night, and they had a small herd elephant, 6 or 8. And he came in, he had a briefcase. And in his briefcase was a box of Hershey bars, a .45 automatic, and a bunch of cash. And he bought the whole herd. They lit it up with their cars. And he bought the whole herd, taking the cash out of that thing. He was something. I gotta get my specs. Oh, before I went to the Herpetarium, I got to back up a little. Before I went to the Herpetarium, Jerry had worked in Waco, and I met her, and we dated a couple of years, and she volunteered at the zoo. But our first date, she had a very nice dress that she bought. She worked and bought it herself. And her daddy didn't care much for me. But she put that dress on, we were going to the movie. But somebody had called the zoo and said, there's a creek behind my house, it's got a bunch of snakes in it. Could you come catch them? And I said, we need to go by and have a look at that on the way to the movie. Well, we went by, and just late before dark, I had a light, and I told Jerry, I said, wait here on the bank, and I want to go check these snakes out. There's a bunch of diamondback water snakes. And she said, you're not about to go without me. And she got a hold of my shirt tail. And we waded in water about this deep. Well, after an hour or so, the water was up to here in her new dress, and she had my shirt tail in one hand and a sack containing several big diamondback water snakes in the other hand. So we didn't make the movie, but when I took her back, her dad was concerned about the way she looked. She came back and told her she ought to really consider what would happen if she really got serious about someone like that. At the time, we had the Harley Bird show, TV show in Waco. And when I first met Harley, it was like meeting John Wayne. He had a good wildlife show. I watched him all the time. But we got to be good friends, and I helped him on the show. Well, one time, he had been to a fair or something in Sweetwater, and they had the roundup going, and he saw them milking rattlesnakes. He said, can you milk a rattlesnake? I said, sure, why? He said, I want you to milk one on my show in 2 weeks. We're having the first show that is done away from the studio. I forgot what it's called. It's done away from the studio where they set up everything and broadcast it from there. At the fairgrounds, Heart of Texas Fairgrounds, the exhibits building, they're setting up a place for me, and you're going to milk a rattlesnake right there. And I'll start publicizing it. I said, okay. And that was that. Except I worried all night because I didn't have any idea how to milk a rattlesnake. And I had a good friend at Baylor University. He was Curator of Strecker Museum, Dr. Bryce Brown. And I called him. I said, hey, I need to learn how to milk a rattlesnake because I told Harley to do it on his show. And he said, well, get 2 rattlesnakes and come over to my house tonight. And I did. And we left his kids in there, went to the bedroom, and we turned them loose. And he pinned one, he picked it up, and he said, now, this is the venom gland. And right here at the 9 angle of each eye. And all you got to do is you put the fangs over a beaker of some kind, and you just gently massage these venom glands, and the venom will roll down. And that's all there is to it. And everybody think you know what you're doing. And so I said, that's great, I really do appreciate it. So the time came, and I had this nice heavy 4-foot diamondback and a sack sitting back there, and I was a little nervous, and I was right behind the curtain, and Harley was in front of the curtain giving his show, and then he introduced me. Well, just as he started introducing me, Dr. Brown appeared from nowhere. I didn't know he was anywhere around. He appeared, and he set that snake sack on this table, and he took 2 fingers, and he did that with the flap of the sack, and he said, now when you're ready for the snake, just reach between my 2 fingers, and it's already ready. So I did that, and I went out, and I milked the rattlesnake, and Harley Bird looked, and he did a double take, because Dr. Brown had the other end of the snake. And he said, well, folks, Tim's assistant today is Dr. Bryce Brown at Baylor University. And I got through, he held the sack, I dropped the snake in the sack, he tied the sack and disappeared. He disappeared. He only came to me from getting hurt. And he was a good friend, we had a lot of fun. And he took me to a American Association Ichthyologist and Herpetologist meeting in '67, I think, New Orleans, and I brought a picture of that meeting with all the delegates and all their names. And when you see those names, it's all the people who wrote the books. And I met them, most of them. I don't know, I didn't know it at the time. He'd introduce me to somebody and they'd walk off and say, they rode so-and-so. I said, oh, no kidding. Well, I really was pretty ignorant. Now, let's see here. I got a few notes, but I don't want to take too long on this stuff. I might talk too long sometimes. Let's see. I got a timeline here. ZFA formed in 1966 in Waco. On our days off, we'd go visit each other in other zoos. And it got to the point where we'd all get together once in a while. So there was a bunch of people congregated in Waco, and we decided, why don't we start an organization and do this formally once a month? It's to help each other with problems of maintaining captive reptiles and amphibians in a zoo situation. So there's quite a few of us there, and we tried to figure out what to name it. And everybody had come up with a name. Well, Earl Turner came up with Zoo Fauna Association, and we agreed that sounds good. So then they said, okay, let's get the first president, and they started naming names, and I ended up being first president, not because I was smart, because we met at my house and my zoo, and they were just kind of paying me back. So I was the first president, and the guy there, Tommy Logan, was what, second president?
I was just thrilled to follow you.
Anyway, we'd get these snakes in from around the world, and everything was wild caught. Now today you can buy anything you want. It's on food, no parasites. But then, boy, it was wild. And so we had to figure out what these things ate and all. And we'd call each other. I remember one time Logan was in Houston, and I was in Waco, I believe, and we each got in an emerald tree boa. And was having trouble getting them to feed. And I phoned different zoos, and I had all kinds of ideas how to get an emerald, wild emerald to feed. One was you fill a garbage can with about this much water, and you put a stick in the center with a little platform on top, and you put the snake on that and let it wrap, and you put the lid on and let it sit there a while, and then you get through, and it sometimes will take a dead chick. Well, Logan called me, he said, I got ours to feed. I said, how? He said, well, we fogged it. We got it really fogged. And I forgot you raised or lowered the temperature. Raised it, after fogging it, and
I think I've changed something. I might have.
Alright. And he said, now, the trick is, we got a dead chick on a pair of forceps, and we slapped it around until we got tongue action. When we got tongue action, we pulled its tail and grabbed the chick. You remember that? That really happened. And that's how we got the first emerald feed. We do anything.
Later we learned that this tickling you on the belly has the same effect. They don't know that, but they won't grab it. They don't pinch them.
And like I say, I'm bouncing around